I don't know what I'm doing. Welcome to the newest seasonal roundup, where I watch as much anime as I can possibly squeeze into my schedule all the way through so that I can tell you whether or not they're worth your time. I'm not like other girls who just watch the first episode and judge based on just that. I set that shit to turbo speed and judge shows that many people dedicated significant chunks of their lives to based on my abbreviated experience and emotionally jaded critical criteria. You're welcome. Don't forget, I want to judge each show as fairly as I can on its own merits, but as a general rule, I always give a personal edge to shows that make me interested, invested, and excited. Naturally, that means I tend to prefer action or fantasy shows over another samey slice of life show. Again, that's my bias. I will still tell you what slice of life shows are better than others. Also remember, I typically don't cover my favorite long-running shonen anime in these roundups just because I won't have much to say other than it was awesome and everybody already knows that those shows are awesome. And I want to spotlight shows that don't get as much attention. So stuff like Jujutsu Kaisen, Dr. Stone, Fire Force, Demon Slayer, Bleach, Black Clover, etc. are or were off the table for these. Anyway, just wanted to remind you how I do things here in case this is your first roundup video of mine. With all that out of the way, let's get this thing rolling. First up is Witch Hat Atelier. This show is it, man. It really is. This is one of the very few anime that transcends the medium of anime as like a quirky Japanese cartoon to become something that is undeniably incredible on every level. The characters are lovable and charming, the world is visually stunning, the system of magic is flawless, the direction of the story is gripping and engaging, even thought-provoking, even the emotions it can evoke in any number of ways works effortlessly. The animation is beautifully done and feels and looks unique even in a market full of unbelievable animation. The music is perfect and works super well to enhance the already amazing fantasy vibes this one gives off. The voice acting is phenomenal, even the most boring scenes are fun and engaging to watch. Again, every single aspect of this show is done to nigh perfection. I mentioned this once before when I talked about the Witch Hat manga, but this anime might have the most well-crafted world of any anime ever. No detail is too small, and it makes sure to serve us everything on a beautiful silver platter by spending plenty of time exploring and letting us get to know the world of magic and witches little by little as Coco stumbles around getting herself into trouble. The pacing throughout is slow, but intentionally so, since it takes the time to get the most out of every single thing that happens for every character involved. And the stakes of the situations as it progresses escalate beautifully, too. Just like everything else in this, the pacing is immaculate as we get more and more familiar with the amazing world created here. One thing I think it's worth pointing out that this show does so well is that amongst the various main characters' mistakes, bad attitudes, emotional outbursts, questionable decisions, and all the drama and tension that comes with that, nobody is outright wrong. Coco is a hyper-curious, energetic girl who went too far, taking it upon herself to discover the secrets of magic and paid for it. But she really didn't do anything wrong. How was she supposed to know, right? Like, you can see her perspective. On the other hand, Agat definitely has a shitty attitude towards Coco from the beginning, but you can also understand why, especially once the show reveals that she's part of a prestigious family, so you can see her perspective. Riche is pretty docile, but even the happy-go-lucky girl Tetia has moments where her emotions get the better of her, and it's clear from the start that she has lofty ambitions. So when she thinks she's done for with the whole dragon thing, she blames Coco, and again, she's not wrong. Coco was reckless there. Even Keyfree. He probably should not have let Coco keep her memories and made her an apprentice, but his obsession with the brimmed caps made him make a rash decision that he's lucky to have a good enough reputation to get away with. But being able to create this kind of scenario basically instantly among these characters where nobody is outright wrong, again, speaks to how well crafted this story is from every angle. And it's going to stay that way going forward. Remember Custis and Dagda from the river incident, remember them. Although I will say, based on what we know about how magic works and how physics works, the Sylph shoes should probably not allow you to idly hover in the air like we see a lot throughout this. because when you put your feet together, the wind spell should just be straight blasting with an invariable strength. I'm sure someone on Reddit has already pointed that out, and maybe there is an explanation, but I'm not going on there to find out. But yeah, this show is just fucking incredible. I cannot recommend it enough, no matter who you are or what you like. If I had to combine every single aspect of how I judge anime for these roundups, like my subjective opinion, my objective assessment of the show's competence in all aspects, overall appeal to a potential audience, this is at or near the very top of all anime in existence. I genuinely think it's that good. Next up is Akane-Banashi. I am very glad to see this one get an anime as well. I genuinely figured it would be kind of tricky to get right, since Rakugo is a real practice and surely deserves a lot of dedication to getting right in anime form, but I think this one does a really great job with it. I've mentioned quite a few times over the years about shows that are like shonen anime in disguise, that meaning like they're not about what most shonen manga are about, like fighting or adventuring or what have you, but the way that the story unfolds and the pacing is structured works the same way as those other shonen manga. And this is just a straight up Shonen Jump manga, so it's not exactly in disguise, but the point is the same. The pacing is just like a battle shonen. Akane is presented with a bunch of different challenges, each consecutive one building off the last, and has to train herself to overcome them. Now, as you'll be unsurprised to hear, I've never heard, seen, or watched a real-life Rakugo performance, but I have to assume that the anime did a great job portraying how real-life Rakugo would feel. Even more so the imperfect kind, as students or trainees might perform. And even those who aren't familiar at all with Rakugo, I think this does a great job of showing exactly what elevates better performances compared to beginner performances. Plus other elements like the receptiveness of each particular crowd and the effect that that kind of thing has on performances is also talked about explicitly and explained in good detail to help us understand. I mean, in that sense, this basically acts as a sports shonen anime. Like competition, rivals, all that. Like, this is a gold standard example of how you can take an idea or practice that doesn't seem tailored to a shonen experience at first glance and turn it into a rock solid and compelling viewing experience. And again, as you won't be surprised to hear, Akane herself is a big reason why this show works as well as it does. Right off the bat, we learn what kind of girl Akane is, how she looks up to her dad and loves Rakugo, and then learn about the inciting incident that becomes Akane's motivations for literally the rest of the series. So we're instantly given a reason to care about the story and root for Akane as she makes her way up through the world of Rakugo. And her personality, very straightforward, authentic, easily endears us, the viewers, to her as we watch her throughout. It's not rocket science, right? It's not like that incident at the beginning is particularly strong or interesting compared to other shows that are similar, but the way it's presented, again, we're immediately given a reason to invest in what Akane does next. And the show does do a good job with the carrot and stick, so to speak. It sort of drip feeds you little by little about the reason why Isho did what he did and how Akane plans to respond. Also, introducing Kaisei, like right away, as a future rival figure is another great way to keep you watching and intrigued for when Akane eventually gets good enough to compete with him. I think what I appreciate most about this show in particular is that each lesson Akane needs to learn, each stride she needs to take before a big performance, she takes basically no time at all to learn those things. She goes through like one extraneous thing that's meant to help her realize what it is that she's missing, and then she's instantly able to apply what she learned to her Rakugo. And none of it takes too long at all. On top of all that, this has a great world with lots of folks in different roles across the world of Rakugo. The characters themselves have a lot of variety and effortlessly serve the narrative in the way they're supposed to, while oftentimes being just entertaining to watch as well. I think because it is about Rakugo and many of us in the West are unfamiliar, it may not be for everyone, but if you have an open mind about it going in, this will easily get pretty much anyone hooked, I think. I've said this about other shows before, but this is a masterclass in just how to build a compelling narrative in the most fundamental way. Fun to watch, solid characters, and a story that hooks you right in. Great stuff. Next up is I made friends with the second prettiest girl in my class. This one lied to me. I thought this was about making friends with the second prettiest girl in the class, but by episode 2, the main character has already also made friends with the number 1 prettiest girl in class. So what the fuck am I even here for? This one is really cute, of course, by and large, thanks to the very sweet and charming dynamic that Maki and Umi have together. Even when some of the other characters are there too, just seeing them do random shit, whether that's game, watch Sharknado, make pancakes, it just gives you a nice warm feeling. Maki himself, I think, deserves a fair bit of credit for how he's written as well. He could just fall into the same loner otaku type we see all the time. But he really stands his ground in spite of everything, and never gets too weird about the pretty girls he suddenly becomes friends with. It really helps him ease into his role nicely. So he and Umi are super cute together, even when they're still just starting out as friends. And I think Umi's inferiority complex that she's trying to fight off in the early goings is very understandable for her, even if the show overblows that angle just a tad in my opinion. But the development from friendship to them dating feels smooth and natural, just like any good friends to lovers arc, and it's endearing to watch happen. There's really no pointless drama in their relationship at all, unless you want to call Umi losing at games all the time drama. So this is absolutely up there with the cutest romances I've watched, I would say. I think when this does try to bring in angles or tension outside of the romance stuff, it never quite sticks the landing. Like, it sort of just brings in certain things to expand on the world or characters a bit more. Like, for example, the whole thing with the class treating Maki like shit just because you seem to like him just went away and never had a proper resolution with the shitty classmates in question. And then the whole divorce stuff with Maki's parents almost had a resolution, but again, nothing was really solved. The parents just lost hostility towards each other, I guess. I mean, everything comes back to Maki and Umi in the end anyway, so whatever, but again, never quite sticks any of those landings. But yeah, this is very sweet, cavity-inducing, if you will. And really, it doesn't put too much emphasis on the slice of life beats themselves, instead always relying on like the dialogue and the cuteness of the dynamic to carry it through. So really, if you like romance stuff on any level, this is totally worth the watch. Batting cleanup is MARRIAGETOXIN. This is a lot of fun. I think Spy Family incited a massive wave of like spy and or assassination mixed with comedy ideas for manga, and somehow all of them have their own brand of funny, and this one is no exception. This is very much in the Sakamoto Days category where the action is really good, like the animation is pretty top tier. But we're at least starting out just following the main characters getting caught up in various dangerous situations rather than building an overarching narrative, right? And I think this works with that beautifully. Like, the visuals are really strong across most of the fight scenes, the Bloodline Plus abilities, and the way they sort of exaggerate science in the same way a lot of recent action manga have done, and the wide variety of ways it does that is fun and makes the action really engaging, and the action is really well paced too. I also think Garo is a solid character. His exaggerated struggles with the ladies are all too relatable, which is the cornerstone of the comedy here, but he also just has a strong foundation as a character. Like, we know his upbringing and how he's so powerful, but also why he made the choice to live for himself and choose his own future partner. He always holds steadfast to what he believes and is just a genuinely good guy, almost in spite of the way that he was brought up, which all makes him an endearing lead, I think. And like I've said so many times, if you have a good main character, that on its own can get viewers invested, and you can do basically whatever you want from there, and viewers will be able to care about it, even if we're not building a big overarching story, because you just want to watch the main character's journey. Although I do wish Kinosaki could help out a bit more and not just stand around half the time. Although I do recognize that their role is mostly to bring the confidence out of Garo, which they do very well. And I like having them around as well. The main two's dynamic is fun. And it's not like each little arc on its own doesn't have its own little story, right? Like, each one has great fights, like I mentioned, introduces a potential marriage prospect who we learn about, and has a little character arc of their own, and it all comes full circle by the end. The last arc in particular, with the hamster girl, was really good. And I actually like that format for this, because though they are distinct story arcs, you can kind of see Garo growing as a character and as a fighter as the show goes on. So it does feel like watching this progress pays off in a tangible way. So yeah, really good stuff. I enjoyed this one a lot. I think it has such a strong concept and beginning to everything, and just kind of builds from there. Visuals are really strong, and characters are fun with rewarding character arcs. Just a great watch. I'm looking forward to season 2. Next up is the Warrior Princess and the Barbaric King. This is a decent enough premise, but I don't think it ever really finds its footing, either as a romance or as a fantasy/action show. Not to say this is bad, because it's absolutely not, but it never really reaches a level where you're actually invested in it. Definitely the strongest thing about this is the main character, Seraphina. She's a pretty typical Lady Knight type character, but because she has a very well-defined character and a strong sense of justice, while also being vulnerable enough to let herself start falling for the Barbarian King Veor, we feel at least some level of attachment as she leads us through the show and experiences all this unfamiliar stuff in the Barbarian Kingdom without it feeling contrived or awkward. She's a rock-solid lead character. The romance is just too generic and not really interesting on any level. Like, I don't have any problem with a haughty Lady Knight type character meeting a man and becoming more cute and feminine, obviously, but as a watching experience, it's just something we've seen a million times before. Like, Veor is really strong, handsome, and kind to Sarah, so as they experience more stuff together, and she realizes the barbarians are not at all what she expected them to be, she just falls for him over time. Like, again, it's not bad, but it's also not at all unique or even particularly well executed. Again, it's just normal. And any conflict it tries to introduce isn't really consequential in any grand scheme of anything, so there's no narrative to tie everything they do back to. And that's not to say that them just exploring the world and Sarah's expanding horizons are boring on their own, but the plot isn't all that engaging either. Like, it's a fine world they've built here, but there's nothing particularly interesting or unique. Maybe the dwarf realm is the most interesting thing, but again, it's inconsequential and doesn't actually play into anything. Also, I do think it's cool that the basis for their abilities and stuff is like willpower, so a fierce desire for strength can be rewarded. But again, it doesn't really mean anything to the story. Again, this whole thing is just kind of decent. And the ending is a bit anticlimactic as well, because I think the biggest point of potential conflict that the show set up was Sarah's asshole of an older brother, and it doesn't execute on that literally at all. So that's just a big plot point that they leave open-ended, as if to just shout at you, well, go read the manga, idiot! Like, even the fight with the dragon in the final episode doesn't end conclusively, and it was all just a test by the dragon. Cool. Although the romance does come to fruition by the end, so that's nice, I guess. Anyway, yeah, this is decent. I wanted more out of it, but it's not a bad watch. It just left a few somethings to be desired. Next up is the Ramparts of Ice. This is a very good show. I don't even really have any bits to make here. For a show that's more about the experience of school life, the social struggles that students face at this point in their lives, and the complications of falling in love with your friends, how to cross that line, and then dating in a place where popularity is superficial and everybody knows everybody else and everything that's going on at any time. This is probably about as good as it could have been, because I would normally blow this kind of show off as just boring or not for me. Now, this is by the same creator as You and I Are Polar Opposites, and the sense of humor, open-mindedness, and generally not at all overbearing high school kid vibes that the characters have here is definitely the same. But this one is far more poignant and potentially good for kids to be exposed to, since this show focuses on very emotionally driven themes that are very present in many people's lives, and how well it executes on those themes using its realistic, well-written, and relatable characters, all while keeping the tone lighthearted and super digestible. So while it's definitely not as fun as You and I Are Polar Opposites, I still had a surprising affinity for these characters by the end, especially for a show that's this mundane. So I think that's a massive credit to this show. The main character, Koyuki, I think is especially relatable, namely in the way that she dealt with the messy situation with dating and bullying that she ended up in middle school, and how she kind of closed herself off in high school to avoid anything similar. But then as it goes on, she opens her heart little by little. It really is well done. I think this handles all of its drama, romance related or otherwise, in a very sensible way, such that no one thing ever becomes too much and overwhelms any part of what the show's identity is. It definitely has a good amount of drama, but the way the show treats its drama almost feels very mellowed out compared to a lot of other similar shows in this style. Again, it still feels very lighthearted and easy to watch despite the drama. So basically what I'm saying is, if you like slice of life shows and that's your thing, this is like 3,000% worth a watch. Like, you'll get so much more out of this than I did. Nippon Sangoku, the Three Nations of the Crimson Sun. This is an interesting beast to approach from a critical standpoint because I do think it's well done, but I also find it kind of hard to invest in the story. It's not like the story feels contrived or forced or anything, but what it does do is keep us super up to date with everything that happens on every side of this Japan-wide war situation. And normally I would say that's a great thing, but it does this by basically sacrificing us being able to watch the journey that the main character takes, trying to get revenge on the regime that killed off his wife. And granted, like, skipping to his promotion or whatever isn't necessarily unbelievable or whatever, because we know from early on that he has what it takes to be a strategist, but I don't know, man, like, it makes it seem like it's going to be following the main character and his new little rival fellow, the one with the bob cut, a lot, but it introduces that kind of interesting dynamic that they have, and then we barely spend any time with them after that. So it feels more like I'm watching a war documentary rather than a narrative with characters that I want to root for. I mean, the main character literally had his brand new wife murdered while he was asleep, but the follow-up to that barely lasted another 2 episodes before it just ditched him and started showing us other stuff. But at the same time, and unlike another show, which falls into this weird documentary category that I'll be talking about later, this one actually does feel like it succeeds at that angle. It presents a lot of interesting dilemmas around morality and human greed, why humans wage war, how leaders can come into power, that kind of thing. Like, we see a lot of the lady dictator and the nation that's invading the nation the main character's in the army for, and how she said a bunch of pretty words about how everything is for the citizens, for the people, but she actually just wants revenge for her father's death. Politics 101, right? Saying whatever just to get as many people as possible on your side. But it almost becomes her story as much as it is the main character's, at least in this season 1. Until, you know, the very end, which just upends like everything, leading into the following manga arc, which I will not be reading. But this is basically all about the, I think very bold, war that the lady dictator declared on the neighboring nation and how it unfolded. And there are some through lines, like with that super corrupt fat old man who was originally the one that had the main character's wife killed for talking back to him. There was also that strategist guy who got sick near the end and kind of helped inspire the main character. So there's some stuff you can latch onto. There's also this big moment for the main character near the end, which he acts on after putting together a bunch of seemingly unrelated clues that suggested that the fat old man was trying to get another guy ousted from the army or whatever. But like I mentioned, since we don't actually spend much time with the main character, even though the whole season had kind of been building to that moment, it becomes more like a, oh wow, look at him go moment instead of a, yes, let's fucking go moment like it probably wanted to be. Or should have been. Anyway, yeah, if you like war strategy, this is it, man. Like, it's all war strategy and hardly anything else. But even as like a war documentary, it is fairly compelling. Like, again, for what it is, I didn't dislike it, and I do think it's well done. But the main character didn't really feel like he had much of a journey. I don't know if it was really trying to balance the hero's journey aspect with the war documentary aspect, but if it was, it didn't really work. But if it was just trying to be a war documentary, it definitely worked. That said, it's not really what I prefer personally out of an anime experience. Next up is Agents of the Four Seasons, Dance of Spring. This is very good. I think it should have done some things different in execution, but this is in the My Happy Marriage tier of supernatural romance, slice of life type anime. My biggest and really only issue here is how this starts at a point in Hinagiku and Sakura's lives where the most dramatic twists and turns have already happened. And instead of episode 1 detailing those twists and turns for us and like how we got here, it instead starts into its narrative in a more mundane way, and we learn about the dramatic stuff in little flashbacks over the course of the show. I just think giving us the lowdown on Hinagiku's capture and her eventual return home, how Sakura tried and failed to save Hinagiku in that moment, even the Winter Agent's role in all of that, in episode 1 would have made for a better hook. And I think it does imply a lot of that stuff early on, but I wanted more, at least personally. I'm not saying the hook didn't work, because I still think it's fine, especially for its target audience, which does not include me. But I think I would have been instantly given a great reason to care had I seen everything play out right at the start. And naturally, we do find out everything eventually, no matter how fucked up it is. But I don't think it's some storytelling master play to wait until halfway or 3/4 of the way in to give us flashbacks that help us invest in Hinagiku and Sakura's stories when I could have been invested from the start if they had just put those flashbacks earlier in the show. But everything besides that is great, at least as far as this kind of supernatural type show goes. Like, it's mainly slice of life elements with supernatural abilities mixed in. It feels very mature in its writing and character work, most notably with Hinagiku and Sakura's very layered relationship, but also with a lot of the supporting cast too. Sakura, I think, is an especially compelling character, definitely the best in the show. She deals with a lot of very complex feelings, but is unwaveringly loyal to Hinagiku no matter what. Again, very layered character. And as we see more flashbacks over time, we understand Sakura more and more. And the show is fairly fast-paced for what it is. The first half is more about learning about the characters, and then it dives into the actual plot in the second half. Which is actually pretty solid too. Everything we learn about the situation of Hinagiku's birth to her father's adultery partner, as well as the ongoing tension with the Winter Agent and his guard guy, it all comes full circle and ends in a nice place. Although for most of this, there's not so much romance as much as there is like yearning from a distance and lots of regret. But I do think everyone's feelings in the aftermath of watching Hinagiku get kidnapped in front of them and having to live with that for 10 years is, again, handled very maturely by the show, which is good. Although it does feel weird that the whole point of the agents existing is to call upon the incoming season or whatever, and that being their role doesn't really matter to the show, like, at all. Like, even though there's this big hoopla at the start about how spring's not coming because Hinagiku is gone, it doesn't end up really mattering to the actual narrative. And the agents can just use season-related powers, I guess. So, cool. Whatever. The kidnapping of the Autumn Agent is a nice way to incite the tension and urgency in the characters and get the bad guy's whole scheme in motion. The antagonist in this is fine, like, she makes sense for the story even if her motivations feel a bit flimsy. I actually think the big dramatic arc involving the Autumn Agent's kidnapping could have used a bit more time to escalate itself. It actually ends up feeling a tad bit rushed in my opinion, especially because it pretty much falls completely flat as soon as the Winter Agent finally shows up right at the end. But the action scenes throughout this show are generally very good. Visuals overall are really strong here. But yeah, this is very good. Like I said, it's not really my thing, but if you do like this kind of supernatural, very emotionally involved kind of show with lots of twists and turns, I would absolutely recommend this. Although some of those twists and turns do feel like they happen for no actual reason. Like the thing with Ruri, the summer agent, at the end. Why did that happen? Anyway, like I said, this is very good. Kill Blue! This is good fun. This feels more in the Spy Family category of comedy, where the characters are all on like parallel wavelengths, never quite on the same page, while the action is squarely in the Sakamoto Days category. I mean, one of the earlier big action scenes involves the main character trying to escape having a pacifier shoved in his mouth, like a baby. Probably the only point of meta contention here is the fact that a hitman going on 40 has his body reverted to when he was in middle school while retaining his memories and gets swept up in a pseudo-romance with an actual middle school girl while the man's ex-wife watches on. And that is the cornerstone of the comedy, of course, because the guy just doesn't quite fit in since he lacks the sensibilities of an actual kid. And even though there is a connection between whatever changed the main character's body's age and the young lady he's supposed to watch over, since her parents own a huge company or whatever, the whole thing feels more like a contrived excuse to get this one moving with the premise it wants, rather than something that incites the story or gives the character's motivations in any meaningful way. But on the bright side, there is a pretty clear line in the sand drawn so that it never gets all that weird or off-putting regarding the age thing. But, I find the show itself pretty fun and entertaining, so even if the beginning feels contrived, I don't mind too much. Like, the action scenes are fun, the characters are okay, not great, but good fun at least. It doesn't rush anything, so the pacing feels nice. And Ogami does have a nice little arc where he starts out super jaded after being in the hitman business for so long. But after being in school and spending time with these hopeful young folks, he realizes his life is also full of potential and possibility and whatnot. It's decent. But yeah, this one's bread and butter is the same style of mixing action and comedy that we've seen in many recent anime, and it's no slouch. If you like Sakamoto Days or even MARRIAGETOXIN or whatever, this is a solid show that's a similar style but still retains its own identity. Good stuff. Kamiina Botan fully blossoms when drunk. I had a certain curiosity about this one going in since I've seen a fair bit of art of Miss Botan from Japanese artists, and not much to report, honestly, like classic cute girls doing cute things. This is even a bit more mundane than those other shows in that genre, but it does actually do a decent job of exploring the big wide world of alcohol in all its various forms. Although that isn't its focus per se, it's just the show's little gimmick, I guess, like the equivalent to camping in Laid Back Camp. So it's like pretty much no drama, just cute girls going around being cute. But actually any amount of drama this does have comes from characters getting jealous of other characters, various growing levels of intimacy with each other. But surprisingly enough, this does eventually escalate into actual romance in the later parts. Although that still doesn't cause any heavy drama, which is good. And on that note, I do like the sort of romance arc, if that makes sense. Ibuki is someone who loves to drink, but doesn't like to around other people since she's had bad experiences with it in the past. But when Botan accidentally catches her drinking one day, they become drinking buddies, essentially, and it escalates from there. Botan being the one to break down Ibuki's barrier like that doesn't feel particularly earned, but it does make for a decent foundation to everything. And the other characters aren't exactly noteworthy, but they do feel very human. They got ups and downs, various hobbies and interests, all that jazz. But probably the most notable thing about this one, as a creation, are the visuals. The whole art style changes every so often. And the main art style is really cute, like it's definitely my favorite, very Bocchi the Rock-esque. But in a show like this, with absolutely no stakes, no super heavy drama, you're not really watching for the visuals to be a specific way, just for them to convey the spirit of the show. Playing fast and loose like this is actually a fun idea and totally something more shows could play around with. Like, I don't think changing the art style the way this does makes it more charming, like, as a show, if that makes sense. Like, the art style changes don't endear me any more or less to the characters. But it does bring me some comfort to know that the creators of the show were having some fun making this, and that's really the most important thing. And you know what? I would argue a big part of the appeal of these shows is not just the pretty girls, but the constant new outfits that the creators choose for them across the episodes. This type of show often feels very fashion conscious, and this definitely is as well. It's something I've noticed before, but this one actually made me want to mention it. The art style, combined with all the girls' cute outfits, was downright inspiring, on top of being cute as hell. So that's definitely another way the creators have fun with this. So yeah, this is a very sweet show, definitely a welcome addition to the cute girls doing cute things genre. That's often a levity for me when I go through these seasonal anime. I'd recommend it if you're looking for something slow and easy to watch with lots of cute girls. Also, if you're someone who would oust or shame someone you're drinking with for having the hiccups, You're not welcome here. That is the dumbest shit I've ever heard. Next up is Gals Can't Be Kind Otaku? I get the glaze now. This one is effortlessly charming. It's the thing I've mentioned in a lot of other shows. Having any character be passionate about anything, whether it's a hobby or what have you, in this case it'd be the magical girl show that Takuya and Kei both like, it makes them instantly more likable and endearing. And I think that's true for people in real life too. Like when someone genuinely and passionately enjoys something, it removes any sense of doubt of like whether or not they're being authentic and true to themselves. So I'm a big fan of using that kind of thing in shows like this because I instantly feel more attached to really any character who isn't afraid to express themselves through enjoying or just being a fan of something, no matter what it is. And while Kotoko, the blonde one, isn't the same as the other two in that sense, she has the typical Gyaru thing going where she never even thinks about judging them for being nerdy and liking a kid's show, and is even happy to join them in watching it. So she's very easily accepting and supportive on top of being naturally social. And also Takuya, the otaku kid, is written like a loner otaku kid, but in a way that is way less abrasive than other characters of the same trope. Like his reactions to the girls being nice to him don't feel overdramatic at all. He doesn't have an obscene amount of inner monologue for no reason, and he never lets his nervousness come between him and spending time with the girls. Usually. Until the end with that samey, we live in different worlds crap. It was doing so well not doing that until then. But all that is to say, despite Takuya having the otaku kid thing going on, these three work very well together, and it's generally pretty fun to watch them do whatever it is they're doing at any given time. And since most slice of life shows, including this one, don't bother trying to reinvent the wheel when it comes to what the characters do throughout the show, the character dynamic is by far the most important thing for a slice of life show. And this one is great for what it is. I've said it a million times, slice of life shows aren't really my thing, especially because more often than not, they all feature ever so slightly different characters doing any number of the same routine checklist of Japanese school life BS. But I genuinely had fun with this one. Again, both Kotoko and Kei are written and portrayed in a way such that it at least somewhat makes sense that they fall for Takuya, since they can both be their authentic selves around him with no caveats. So even if they do the same shit as every other slice of life show, it's still cozy to watch them and effortlessly makes you feel warm and fuzzy. So yeah, I liked this one. Mistress Kanan is devilishly easy. For a show of the overly sexy and full of innuendos and dirty jokes as the centerpiece of the comedy style of rom-com, this is pretty dang charming. For how relentless it is with its fan service and general dirty humor, I actually think this manages to strike a nice balance to the point it never becomes overbearing. The sense of humor really is spot on for what this is. Of course, a big help with that is Kanan's primary character quirk being that she interprets a lot of stuff as being dirty when it's not, and then gets overly embarrassed about it. The whole show is really built around that. And of course, it's not like that's never been done before, but it's just even more exaggerated here. And the way that not just the boyfriend, but also all the other characters help play that up for her just helps her become more endearing on a very simple level, and helps the whole show just be more fun to watch. I really think this works on a fundamental level. And when you have the fundamentals down for your series, everything else sort of falls nicely into place. Again, I've said it a billion times about various rom-coms. This doesn't reinvent the wheel, the plot itself doesn't break new ground, and the characters themselves aren't particularly compelling. But all I could ever ask for from any rom-com is three things. The writing and dialogue is fun, engaging, and flows well. The characters, ideally including the supporting characters, all play off each other in a fun and silly way, and the main romance is cute and charming. This has all of those things. And of course, I won't be complaining about the fan service either, but the thing is, you can find that shit anywhere. I'm repeating myself here, but it's the thing gacha games do, right? First, you create the premise and the ideas for what roles need to be filled for the story to work. And then, you just make the characters who fill those roles really hot. Like, it's not rocket science. If you have a genuinely good show, a good concept, any fan service doesn't take away from the substance of what the show is. It's just that this one also has a lot of sex jokes, so every woman having giant badonkers doesn't really feel remotely out of place. But yeah, again, the plot isn't inspiring here, but the main two's dynamic is very sweet, the romance doesn't feel forced, and the supporting cast doesn't feel like they're taking up space and contribute in their own ways to the comedy and the character dynamics throughout. Plus, on top of all that, again, the humor is actually funny, and there are a lot of small details that don't matter much, but are funny if you happen to catch them in that moment that contribute to the way this one's humor lands. Plus, all the characters having various kinks is funny as well. Probably takes a particular sense of humor to get a kick out of this one, now that I say that out loud, but yeah, good stuff. Next up is I Want to End This Love Game. Dear viewer, have you ever watched a show, romance-focused or otherwise, and saw a couple that clearly are into each other but just will not get together for whatever reason? And you just think, ugh, I can't deal with these two, just kiss already! You know, Natsu and Lucy, Asta and Noelle, Okarun and Momo. I just listened to a bunch of shonen ships. It doesn't matter. Well, imagine a slice of life anime where the entire goal of every scene in the show is to make you feel that feeling as strongly as possible. If you like slice of life romance anime with a solid, well-established dynamic for a budding romance, you'll probably like this one. Now, I have read this manga, but I had yet to talk about it until now. I'll admit it, this grates my nerves. I don't really like romance anime all that much to begin with, but once the initial novelty of the kind of unique premise of this one wears off, it gets tedious and kind of boring, and all it has left is unresolved sexual tension. That being said, there is no denying that this succeeds at exactly what it's trying to accomplish, and succeeds with aplomb, with flying colors. So, while I personally just wish that Yukiya and Miyu would just mash pissers already so that this could be over, everything this show attempts lands like it's supposed to. The dynamic between them is mostly very sweet and entertaining to watch. You can empathize with both of their feelings regarding why they've kept up the love game for so long, and the way that these two positively influence each other to grow and improve themselves makes the progression feel meaningful. And the two of them do have pretty different personalities, so the way that they attempt to fluster each other is unique to what they believe in their hormonal teenage minds will work. And the tension does escalate as it goes on too, so it never gets too stale. And as with many slice of life shows, this doesn't do anything we've never seen in the genre before, so it keeps things simple with the size of the cast, the locations they visit, and what they get up to, all that jazz, but it's all cute enough. Also probably worth mentioning, I find most of the side characters in this to be just taking up space, but they also don't really get in the way. They're mostly completely forgettable, Wakana and Kazane being the only exceptions. So yeah, begrudgingly, this one is good. I hate that I have admitted that now, but I ain't no fucking liar. I don't have to like it, but this is a good show. Next up is Haibara's Teenage New Game Plus. I really have to appreciate how shamelessly straightforward this is. I mean, it's a time leap romance anime that actually just has the main character live the high school life he wished he'd had the first go round, and there's no real caveats to that. He just goes on a big diet, joins a rock band, and gets all the girls. This has shades of Chitose's in a Immune bottle in the sense that our main character here is not only now getting all the girls because he's handsome, but also now with his 10 extra years of wisdom, starts helping out all of the folks around him with personal issues of varying shades. Although this one lacks the sense of humor, but I'm actually glad that this one didn't try to be funny because I don't think it would have succeeded. But the drama in this one for the most part doesn't feel forced, and the way Haibara helps each character overcome what they're struggling with fits in decently with his character and into his own growth arc as he works on bettering himself. The characters' various struggles do actually feel fitting for teens their age and help contribute to what this show wants to do, while also not feeling too much like stupid teen drama. Not gonna blow your mind, but certainly nothing to sneeze at. But coming away from this, the only thing I thought was that was just another standard slice of life romance thing. The romance development isn't bad really, and it mostly does feel like Haibara earns all the good things that are now coming his way in his second go-round. So overall, this doesn't really leave a lasting impression, but it does hold its ground for what it is. If you want a decent little slice of life thing with some pretty ladies to just shut your brain off for a bit, this is not a bad offering at all. Plus, it ends on a happy note, except for the post-credits scene, but yeah, not too shabby. It does reek a little of a self-insert thing, but who am I to judge? The Klutzy class monitor and the girl with the short skirt. This is great. The over-the-top silliness is exactly the kind of thing that can make me genuinely enjoy a slice-of-life rom-com like this. As you've already heard, not every slice-of-life show can win me over, but I really do like this one. First thing worth mentioning, visuals are great here. The sense of humor comes through in the visuals alone. The art style is pretty already, but then they just animate everything in an over-the-top way that perfectly matches the over-the-top humor the whole show has. There's nothing particularly interesting about what they do or anything. Like most good slice-of-life shows, the thing that makes it fun is the characters' caricatured personalities and how they're intentionally made to play off each other in a funny way to create silly situations that make you laugh. Which, aside from the romance stuff, is mostly what this one wants to do. And sometimes the humor is mixed into the romance, like what the show does with the former delinquent boy and the Twin Tails girl. Their whole romance angle is just a funny bit, right? But it's also pretty clearly implied that there's something there. And the main romance I actually like. This is a pretty rare case where I think the development of the romance is kind of just okay or decent objectively, but I like it personally. Like, some of it doesn't really feel earned in the context of the show, but I think the dynamic that Poem and Togo share is just so charming and sweet, and I think the show makes it pretty clear why they fall for each other despite having such contrasting personalities. But like, when you boil it down, it kind of relies on a lot of samey anime tropes you see in a lot of romance shows and doesn't really distinguish itself at all. But again, I don't mind because I think the romance is cute, so who cares really? I think I could have gone without spending so much time with the student council president girl and the vice president guy's romance angle. It wasn't really all that funny or sweet, just kind of strange. And the last angle with Togo making a big deal about the prom was fine since it forces him to confront the class monitor role he's held onto for so long against his feelings for Poem, but I think it was slightly overblown and took too long to resolve. So the show's not infallible, but overall, I had a good time watching this show. I think it's mostly very funny and charming to boot. So yeah, I recommend this one if you like funny, silly romance anime. It can be a lot though. It's definitely on the same level of chaotic as like a Ranma 1/2 or something similar. Next up is Even a Replica Can Fall in Love. As strange as this is, I don't hate it. It's very niche light novel coded. This is yet another slice of life rom-com type thing that introduces a single supernatural concept into everyday life and explores the complex feelings that these kids struggle with as a result of the supernaturalness. The replica idea itself isn't bad, it's just that I almost feel like it's not interesting enough to differentiate this one from any other run-of-the-mill slice of life show. Which, again, is fine. Like, not every show is the most creative or the most innovative thing meant to blow my fucking mind, but it's also a shame to have the replica idea as basically the show's whole premise, only for it to just fall into being a normal slice of life rom-com with nothing particularly impressive or interesting about it compared to other similar shows. And this does explore how the replicas feel living as replacements of their originals, and the people who we learn have replicas throughout this have very different reasons for their replicas needing to exist. Which is good, but even stuff like how the replicas can just die and come back with no consequences, since they're basically just a thought projection of their originals, that really just exists as a thing and doesn't mean anything to the story or even change the trajectory of the character's actions or motivations. The show just continues to be a normal slice of life show. Again, not a bad slice of life show. I think the purple-haired girl and her situation is the emotional high point of this show. Sunao's arc, the original Sunao, coming back into the world after she had put everything on her replica for so long, doesn't feel super earned, but there is intrigue in seeing her and Aki's original and then their replicas leading separate lives at the same time, when usually the replicas are living the original's lives for them. I do like how this ends. I could have gone without the doppelganger bullshit, like, oh, I can't see both you and your replica at the same time, I only perceive one existence, or whatever it is. But saying replicas are created for an explicit purpose and given traits that the original wished they could have makes sense given what we know about the replicas and how they work. So yeah, this isn't bad, and I think it does explore the replica concept pretty thoroughly, but it's obvious this still wanted to be a slice of life rom-com at heart, and I think it's a decent one, but the replica concept itself doesn't really provide enough intrigue to distinguish it in any truly meaningful way from other slice of life rom-coms that explore high schoolers' complex emotions. So the whole premise ends up being more symbolic rather than actually contributing to a bigger picture. So this show is kind of just alright. Next up is Go For It, Nakamura-kun. You thought I only watch shows with het or lesbian relationships, didn't you? Not even gay shit is safe from my cynicism. Ha 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 ha! Just kidding. This was pretty good. I think it's very charming to see a show feature a gay relationship in the visual and comedic stylings of a show from the 80s or 90s. Not much to report here. It really is in a similar style to a Rumiko Takahashi work or something similar, but with a more modern setting and less supernatural stuff. Also not nearly as chaotic, just a fast-paced slice-of-life rom-com about a shy young man trying to figure out this whole romance thing. It's especially nice that there's not even a trace of discrimination from other students, so that doesn't ever become an unnecessary point of conflict. Like, surely we're past that as a society by now. But yeah, the whole show is just super goofy humor amongst the characters. In most episodes, it's just like school life stuff, an episode here or there spent doing random nonsense that's usually at least kind of funny. Bit of drama near the end when the love interest boy gets a girlfriend and then breaks up with her like immediately. Pretty much everything is largely inconsequential. I do think they handled the growing friendship between Nakamura and Hirose well, and the over-the-top comedy style of Nakamura fantasizing about how he'll impress Hirose that never goes well at all works just fine in this. Maybe the ending is a little more open-ended than I'd like it to be, but yeah, this is perfectly fine, and it's an enjoyable little rom-com situation. I did like it. An observation log of my fiancée, who calls herself a villainess. This is all right. If nothing else, I think the premise gives it a pretty decent foundation to stand on that helps separate it from run-of-the-mill villainous isekai shoujo slop. This one's thing is that the main girl, Bertia, goes around blabbing to her fiancé, Cecil the Prince, about how she has memories of Japan and of this world as a game from her previous life, and now that she's reincarnated as the villainess, she's going to try her best to be a convincing villainess and hook the prince up with the heroine girl from the game, because that's how they reach a happy ending according to the game's storyline. But the prince here is this overwhelming prodigy kid who can do pretty much anything from a very young age, and is somehow charmed by how unpredictable Bertia is compared to literally everything else in the entire world for him. So he wants to keep her around while Bertia is trying to remove herself from the equation so that the scenario can go according to how she remembers it in the game. And that's the dynamic. But even though Cecil diverges this timeline in post-reincarnation from the original scenario very early on, Bertia keeps trying to do the same thing even after that. Now, of course, there's also the point that the heroine is also an isekai girl, but she's kind of a bitch. So that's all a decent premise to stand on, right? But I don't think this does an amazing job at evolving that dynamic in a way that makes sense. Because even though Bertia thinking all that comes from a good place, since apparently Cecil gets bad endings no matter what happens, if not for the Maiden of Destiny, it doesn't feel like a very smooth progression from the starting point, where she wants to remove herself from the picture completely, to when she eventually allows herself to be with Cecil. And because of that, it can start to feel kinda stale or just unnecessary as the status quo of the main two's dynamic that it keeps coming back to constantly until it eventually shifts. And that shift doesn't feel particularly earned on Bertia's side. Now that being said, on the rare occasions Bertia interacts with some of the other characters, she's plenty endearing, if maybe a bit bland as a character. Like, there's nothing particularly noteworthy about her aside from her overly headstrong approach to this Otome game world. The side characters are pretty much completely bland, not bad but certainly not memorable at all, although I think what this show does with the heroine girl was pretty good for what it was. The show actually spends most of its time following Cecil, so he's really the main character here. It chronicles his mindset as he spends more time with Bertia and how he handles a lot of the issues that come up while they attend their little academy. And since he is so gifted, there's never really a struggle or anything. In fact, a lot of what Cecil does or orders folks to do actually happens outside of the scope of the show's focus, so we never actually see it happen. So pretty much anything that threatens to interfere with Cecil or Bertia is dealt with just like that. So you never actually feel like any potential threat is meaningful at all. But you can definitely understand why Cecil likes Bertia as much as he does. So the romance itself is okay. Not great, just acceptable. But yeah, really not much to this one other than that. Again, I think it's just fine. The premise is executed okay, but I don't think it capitalized on the potential that was there. Just felt like another villainous show in the end. Next up is always a catch. This one's pretty good. As far as shoujo anime go, I like this one quite a bit. It's simple and stays in its lane. As per usual in these types of high society shoujos, the main girl Maria is by far the best part about this show as a whole. In a show where the plot isn't particularly compelling at any point and the setting is pretty standard, it can pretty much get by if it's fun to watch the main girl interact with all the characters throughout the runtime. And Maria is pretty charismatic as a lead character with a fun personality, and she's written and portrayed consistently throughout, so it's at least somewhat engaging to watch her interact with the world and the characters at any given point. You know, like a perfect example of what I mean is how Maria basically forcefully wins over the girls that were trying to bully her at the school or whatever, by just being overly friendly and throwing herself at them, both with her personality and physically. She's comfortable being tomboyish while striving to be more ladylike. I can't help but like her. And while I do like the romance, I think it jumps the gun just a bit. It doesn't really feel like either Maria or what's-his-face Crown Prince Boy should feel as strongly about each other as they do, like, instantly. So their romance doesn't feel super earned, but their dynamic is very cute as the show goes on, which is another big boon for a shoujo like this. It also handles Ida and the younger brother Prince's little side romance angle pretty well for what it is. The stuff with Maria's father is decent as well, and just adding the dynamic with her family back home is a nice addition to this. The plot's nothing to write home about. It does try a little something near the end, but not anything super compelling. But most of the characters are silly, so the whole show's got a good sense of humor. Romance is mostly good, and Maria's a solid main character, so yeah, this is a fun little watch. Nothing to sneeze at. The strongest job is apparently not a hero or a sage, but an appraiser provisional. What? This one's a little boring and all over the place, but I actually think the sense of humor, which is definitely the main way this keeps you on the hook, is pretty good. There's really not a lot to this as far as it being an isekai though, but since this is primarily focused on landing its comedy, that's actually a good thing for this. And again, I think the comedy does land, and pretty effortlessly. It never overcooks any joke, the delivery is always spot on, and it's pretty fast paced with the dialogue. And the main squad have a pretty fun dynamic going on, and although the silly characters and comedy is definitely the main thing, there is still kind of a story here with the weird dark-haired chick who wants to murder Wolfman for whatever reason, and the main boy's friends also got isekai'd to this world, but again, they don't do anything and are just out there somewhere to keep up some sense of intrigue. Also, the elf girl from the very start just kind of goes away after the first episode for most of the show and doesn't come back till the very end. So she doesn't contribute much of anything aside from her massive bazongas. Yeah, actually, now that I'm putting all this out there, the story is kind of a mess. Plus, like most isekai stuff, it doesn't have nearly enough time to actually get anything meaningful in motion, and any progress the main character makes with his powers doesn't really feel earned. So nothing really meaningful happens in these 12 episodes, and it just ends up falling pretty flat. But I do think the comedy is just barely enough to give this one legs to stand on. So this is another interesting beast in the sense that, again, it's not really good from an objective standpoint as a narrative, but it is enjoyable to watch, even if what they do doesn't mean much of anything. I guess I've subconsciously prioritized a good watching experience over narrative competence, despite all my bitching. But hey, if a show can leave you feeling like you had a good time watching, it's never a bad thing. Next up is My Ribdiculous Reincarnation. This is just Mystery Science Theater 3000, but if the thing the characters are watching every episode is like a plot synopsis of an unabashedly insane, hyper-specific parody of an isekai anime. I don't know if any of y'all out there have seen any attempts at scripted comedy by Japanese folks outside of the world of anime, whether that be a YouTube video or what have you. But the style of humor here, with fast-paced back-and-forth dialogue, a distinct clown and straight man that bounce back and forth off each other seamlessly without missing a single beat, although sometimes the straight man may do or say kind of wacky things in a very serious tone to catch you off guard, and, largely depends on bluntly calling out how ridiculous the things the clown says are, and not just letting the stupidity speak for itself. This whole show is just that. You can see it in plenty of other comedy-centric anime too. I'm honestly not the biggest fan of that style of humor myself, but I do think this lands it just fine, right? It's well done, even if I personally would prefer a different style of comedy. Probably objectively the best thing about this is that every new isekai parody uses a different art style / animation style. It adds seamlessly to the goofiness of each one while switching the visuals up to keep your attention. It's the perfect kind of creative idea for a show like this, like the kind of thing you wouldn't actually think of unless you were an animator or director yourself, but is obvious in retrospect, right? Like, there's everything from claymation to American cartoon to actually just Minecraft, and everything in between. They also have a handful of scenarios which are shot IRL and on-site with real actors, which are very clearly half-assed in every regard, which again adds to the humor. Now, this does also work in a strange but kind of wholesome overarching plot where, because the main guy goes around wreaking more havoc than he probably should after being reincarnated as a clock hand or a banana peel, the other gods, aside from our little goddess girl, are all like, we gotta stop this shit. We gotta stop this nonsense, since he's going around fucking up their worlds. So they eventually band together to get rid of him, and they do, but because the main guy made the goddess girl smile, she is able to, stop the collapse of the multiverse or whatever, and the main two are able to reunite. Probably didn't really need to be there, but it does add a little something to this, like a reason for it to exist, which is nice, so I don't mind it. But yeah, this is definitely fun and silly. The meta humor is done pretty well, and it's just so ridiculous to the point that it pretty easily sweeps you along for the ride, so like I said, it's well executed for what it is, even if it's not quite my preferred style of humor. Also felt like mentioning that the best of the random isekai plotlines is definitely the curry plate one. Somehow. Next up is Snowball Earth. This was mildly surprising. It stayed pretty focused in its storytelling, and the 3D visuals really aren't bad at all either. The premise of this one is alright, definitely not bad. Tetsuo as a character, though, is actually the main thing that keeps me from putting this squarely in good territory. Frankly, even beyond me, having had enough of characters who are socially inept for whatever reason and just want to make friends, his arc of getting over his social issues through meeting Ao, Hagane, and the others at this little mall where the Ice Age survivors are hanging out doesn't really feel all that well executed. I can't really explain it, but Tetsuo's big emotional moments just don't feel like they land, especially in the first chunk of this show. I think it's supposed to be that he finally feels comfortable opening up more because the mall folks are showing him very genuine kindness in spite of their bleak situation, and that's fine and all. But it's not like Tetsuo was being scorned before the Ice Age started. Literally, like, the first scene with him in it is him flubbing an easy layup with, like, these two cute mechanic girls who presumably Tetsuo has seen and talked to a bunch of times before, who were encouraging him. So it's not like his social environment post-Ice Age is that different from how it was before. And besides that too, it never really feels like he makes progress in his desire to improve his social skills. And while I do think Tetsuo's relationship with Hagane is fairly sweet and decently well built, especially for this show, him awkwardly telling someone his name and proceeding to celebrate for 30 seconds in his mind, in episode 3, mind you, not 1, 3, is not the best way to endear me to a main character. Now, all that aside, the kaiju tamer aspect of this show feels unique and really helps this one find its footing when it comes to its plot. It's genuinely a cool idea and makes the battle scenes fun. And I have to say, probably the best thing about this is the antagonist, the Colonel guy. Specifically the backstory that explains what's going on with what was formerly the Defense Force or whatever. You know, the guy rose up through the military ranks, started a project where he brought in a bunch of kids in an attempt to raise the next generation of saviors or whatever, but it was actually all for his scheme of surpassing Tetsuo and making him irrelevant or whatever, for the sake of his twisted ego. But then the Ice Age kaiju came in, but he and the kids survived, so eventually they had to resort to eating kaiju flesh, turning them into kaiju tamers. But then the Colonel decides they should use that power to defeat the Ice Age kaiju, and then, again for his twisted ego, upon doing that, he'll be worshipped as the savior of humanity. So it very cleanly explains why the kaiju tamer kids are so wrapped up under his control, despite him pretty clearly being insane, and also why the Defense Force is now so corrupt and taking such extreme action. Even the in-between part of the Colonel helping the kids after the Ice Age happens gets explored later, further explaining why the kids look up to him so much. Although I do wish we actually got introduced, like, properly to the kaiju tamer kids. I don't know any of their names, what their kaiju tamer abilities are, and only know the bare minimum of their personalities. I think this could have done better with that, especially since we're pretty clearly meant to empathize with them, and they'll eventually come to the good side, which they did. Weirdly enough, while the plot is decent for what it is, it doesn't really feel like it finds its footing until the second half. It also kind of feels like it half-asses its characters, aside from Tetsuo. Like, both Ao and Hagane have decent little backstories, but they just never feel like they land in whatever roles they're meant to be playing. Even Hagane's little arc, where she takes her little inventions to go battle the kaiju that ate her parents, it all happens so fast and doesn't quite feel earned, that it doesn't really feel all that important, even when it's happening. That whole thing even ends up serving as more like a transition into the big battle that takes up the whole second half of this season. And Ao is kind of just there as, like, the good kaiju tamer and the girl who can yap enough to let Tetsuo hold a conversation. And she does have a good moment where she battles the kaiju tamer kids in a set of pretty cool fight scenes, but that's really it. Plus, this show also just throws a bunch of characters at you who help in the big battle without actually saying who they are until later on. So again, I do think the plot of this is okay, even the way the battle plays out is pretty solid and keeps intrigue up even after it's over. But it's hard to fully invest when the roster of characters feels just there. But it does get better by the end. But it should have spent the first half letting us get to know the characters more. So yeah, I would say this is worth the watch if you like action, dystopian type shows, that kind of thing. Although Tetsuo is often tough to watch, even among a sea of other socially awkward main characters in the world of anime. So yeah, this whole thing, it's not bad, just weird sometimes. And next up is Petals of Reincarnation. This is way up there in the ranks of anime with wasted potential. I like the concept of this one quite a bit, like the characters have past lives in the way that people actually believe reincarnation could work, who are famous historical figures with varying fondnesses by which society remembers them, and each character's ability is related to their famous past life. And even the dynamic between the main two characters, Toya and Haito, where they become rivals in a strange sense to push each other, is good, at least on paper. But I don't want to say this wastes this good concept, but it certainly doesn't build a worthwhile narrative with it. For example, at about the halfway point, it throws out backstory about the start of the Forest of Greats or whatever, and how that came to be, and what happened between Toya's older brother Seiya and Changyu. And while all that does explain how we got to the point where the show began, it feels so contrived and created after the fact that it feels like it completely sacrifices Seiya as a character. Changyu is able to escape from the Forest of Greats when they eventually turn on him because Seiya is indecisive. He makes this big spiel about how the Sinner reincarnators have to be eliminated because they could be taken over by the evil thoughts and desires of their past lives, and then immediately gives up on that when he has to eliminate his friend. And I think that was supposed to be a moment like, oh, look, it's just like Toya, they really are brothers. So it seemed like what they wanted for him was for Seiya to be this ace-type figure who just loved his brother so much that he kicked the bucket for him. But really, the whole scenario just made Seiya look like a complete fool and not worthy of being the genesis of pretty much everything here. Now that's just one example, but generally speaking, it feels like it throws the plot at you relentlessly with no regard for letting each twist and turn marinate and sit right upon execution. Like, little spoiler warning here. About halfway through, there's this big shift. The guys we thought were good are actually bad, and the guys we were told were bad are actually good. But instead of letting that cook, we just hear a couple times before that happens that Neumann is probably bad at random points, and then we get the backstory stuff that I just mentioned. Toya is like, okay, I understand everything now. And then immediately, Neumann pulls a Dr. Eggman from Sonic Adventure 2 and shows up on every screen on planet Earth to say, you are all going to die. But, with actual minutes worth of exposition. And she even further imitates old Robotnik by laser beaming continents off the map while she's on screen. But the even bigger problem is, that's not the whole truth. There's another layer to it, a puppet master, hiding in plain sight, if you will, who's even controlling Neumann herself. And that's just told to us right after that scene of Neumann on screen. And the signs were there, sure, but we basically have no idea who that person is, how they got here, or what their motivations or goals really are upon being told that they're the puppet master. So no matter how shocking it might be, there's no weight to it whatsoever. So the story isn't worth real investment. It's more like everything just happens and you're swept along. Even from early on, it introduces certain things like, for example, the military-esque group investigating the reincarnators that feel weirdly out of place until later on when it just drops them back in your lap like, oh, well, I guess we're here now. Even the guy leading the military squad has no actually meaningful motivations or backstory relevant to the narrative. And the way that everything plays out after that halfway mark where the shift happens is just baffling and disjointed with no real sense of logical progression. Things just happen for the sake of happening. Like at some point, the guy who literally invented the reincarnator ability just shows up out of nowhere for some reason and doesn't really do anything. Even Toya and Haito's eventual Naruto versus Sasuke moment where their ideals finally clash doesn't really feel earned or warranted and just ends up feeling hollow, despite them coming out the other side better friends than before. Also, the whole reason they ended up fighting in the first place was because Toya somehow concluded, we should get rid of all reincarnators, despite that being exactly what the bad guys were saying. But he just wants to do it in a way that won't kill the reincarnators. And Haito just ends up agreeing with him after they fight for some reason. So the good guy's goal and the bad guy's goal is the same, they're just going about it differently, I guess. So it's just an utterly nonsensical plot, and the ending barely counts as any sense of resolution for anything. I don't hate the visuals or art style or anything, and the characters aren't bad, but the only thing saving this show from being complete nonsensical BS is that the reincarnator power is interesting on its own. Like, that's the main way it kind of keeps you strung along for the ride here. But yeah, there's no weight to anything. It's just a bizarre plot progression. it feels like a waste for how cool this concept is. Next up is Killed Again, Mr. Detective. I like this one. I think I might be in the minority, but I actually enjoyed myself with this. Obviously, this one's whole premise is that the main character just revives after dying, no consequences or anything. So he gets killed plenty of times in various ways throughout this, so there's no real stakes to anything. But it's also exactly what this one set itself up to be. It's not like it subverts your expectations. It's literally the title of the show, and it does turn inward to actually begin exploring how that immortality came to be and its consequences on the wider world. But maybe you could be more invested in what actually happens if the stakes were higher and there were consequences to him dying, that kind of thing. So mixed bag on that, I'd say. And other than that, it doesn't really do the big picture stuff all that well. Like, the big twist that is supposed to move the story forward and motivate the main character for the foreseeable future happens just out of nowhere with no real buildup. And the big mystery that gets set up in that scene gives us almost nothing to go on in itself. And it's not until after that we're given clues as to who may be responsible. And then when those big bad characters are introduced and start being brought into what's happening, the ones who may or may not be responsible, they don't actually do all that much. They kind of just weirdly coexist with the main character Sakuya, and we're not even entirely sure what Sakuya even wants from them or what they're supposed to reveal about that big mystery, because based on what we know about the revival thing and Sakuya's goal, they probably have no real clues about what Sakuya actually wants to figure out. Plus, it's all meant to build in the background of the random assorted murder mysteries that Sakuya gets mixed up in, but it doesn't really feel like it's building anything that much. But it does reveal a little something near the end, which bumps up the intrigue a lot and makes a lot of sense, so it does try sometimes. But aside from that, this really is enjoyable. Like, the assorted murder mysteries are perfectly acceptable, with good variety between each one, and good twists and turns, although some of them are definitely predictable. It has a good sense of humor and decent writing throughout, plus it's paced pretty nicely. Like, we get through a fair bit of this in just 12 episodes. The dynamic between Sakuya and Lilithea that this one really heavily leans on is especially cozy, very much the type where their dynamic is fully established from before where the show begins, so we just get to see them be cute and fun together without seeing the more awkward stages of their partnership. Which I don't mind, it definitely takes good writing to make that work, and this has that for sure. But yeah, I guess if this does have some notable flaws in execution, it'd be low stakes and therefore low investment. The overall story is told pretty sloppily, and it can be kind of predictable. Like, even the twist with what's-her-face, the brunette who looks like Ye Shunguang, wasn't all that surprising. She was weird from the start, right? Shame it never follows up on that here, but yeah. It's absolutely flawed, but it's enjoyable as a watching experience. Kind of bizarre, I guess, but I did have fun. Next up is Yowayowa Sensei. This is alright. As far as shows in the it wants to balance both mundane character growth and also an overabundance of overly erotic fan service genre of anime, this is perfectly acceptable. Of course, anime is really the only medium where you can get away with anything like this and have it be even remotely endearing, and I do think this is at least somewhat charming for what it is, but the whole over-exaggeratedly shy but hardworking teacher tries to become more confident in herself with the help of a few of her students sounds like a perfectly normal sitcom idea by itself, but then add on top of that, also there are lucky lecher scenarios and honker honking out the wazoo, and most all the characters are wacky weirdos, and now you've got a niche anime that's a tad on the nose. But again, it's not like this one doesn't find its footing, because I think it does. Now again, this never evolves the dynamic in any meaningful way, nor does it ever become something more than a run-of-the-mill slice-of-life show. In fact, the only thing there's ever really more of as this goes on is characters whose tits pop out. But again, that's its lane. And it stays there. So the various situations are obviously designed with the erotic fan service in mind. And while Hiyori, the sensei, definitely feels like she makes some progress towards her goal of becoming a more confident person and more reliable teacher, as you'd expect, it's not substantial enough to justify any real investment. But it is there, So I figured I'd at least give it some credit for that. But yeah, if you're not particularly interested in giant tits, this is probably not worth the watch. But if you are, you will not be disappointed. Next up is Needy Girl Overdose. Oh boy. Now, I've never played this game myself, but from what I've seen of folks streaming it a few years back, it seems like it's a resource management / visual novel mix, and the resource you're managing is a mentally ill woman's sanity. So basically, mission fucking impossible. Based on the game's themes, I think the direction for this anime was a pretty smart choice. The whole thing is basically a meta commentary on how social media and influencers / idol figures in the modern day have irreparably changed society forever. The first episode lays it out clean. People know happiness, yet they continue to go on social media knowing that they will compare their own lives to those of their peers or their favorite influencers, and knowing that that will make them miserable. And then all kinds of things can spiral from that. And then on the flip side of that, the various creepy shit talking, all that stuff that influencers see about them all the time wrecks them mentally. Influencers are indeed more vulnerable than celebrities have ever been. Some of them may seem larger than life to their audience, but they're really just one person, and one person can never face the masses and come out completely unscathed. Plus, our little OMG kawaii angel or whatever absolutely does not have a perfect image, what with constantly tripping balls, among other things. So this immediately presents plenty of thought-provoking dilemmas that we face in our modern society. You know, reality is shitty and people will do anything to escape it, how it feels to simply admire seemingly perfect people from afar on social media, all that. But while I do think this is thought-provoking, it's also disjointed and hollow as a viewing experience and lacks any amount of substance beyond being a meta-commentary on internet culture. Like, many of the characters' lines are, on their own, probably worth discussion regarding the state of the world and the internet's effect on society. You know, nothing works quite as well as the internet at making someone's already shitty life exponentially worse. But the characters themselves serve no real purpose. The story it's trying to tell is wrapped in bizarre postmodern symbolism. Like, the whole show might as well be an avant-garde mini-documentary series. And that's fine, but it's not what I want out of an anime experience. Like, I actively started thinking, I don't really want to watch this anymore. And as it gets towards the middle, it does go over some of what the characters in the little 3-piece group that's trying to take down Kawaii Angel went through growing up. But it's not like any of that actually plays into the story or even endears those characters to you. Again, feels more like a documentary about them. Like, okay, now I know why they're like this. And the purple girl, the one who really has it out for Kawaii Angel, has a backstory and a few small scenes throughout of her interacting with Angel that explain why she does want to bring down / help Angel. But her personality shift in her backstory didn't really feel warranted or earned. It just happened out of nowhere for no real reason, because you can become like me. You can become an influencer too. Sure. And even when they do successfully usurp the internet throne from Angel, there are no actual meaningful narrative payoffs for that. So what the fuck was even the point of any of it? Also, the pseudo-main girl, Cash, the one who undyes her hair and breaks her weirdo boyfriend's guitar and breaks up with him partway through, she does pretty much nothing. I almost feel like her intended role was to show how she was a very small-scale influencer and hostess girl, and even what she was going through online and in her hostess job was mentally breaking her, so then you scale that up hundreds or thousands of times, and that's what Angel is dealing with all the time? Maybe? But the actual narrative has basically no place for Cash whatsoever, even as a conduit for the viewers to experience this absolute mess of a story. But what I really wanted to say about Cash is that her character arc falls extremely flat. Like, she basically has enough with her shitty boyfriend and being a hostess, so she just one day decides that she's done with that shit. And apparently that is the turning point that changes her from needing validation to living her life for herself despite how shitty the world is, or whatever. And also why she's the one that starts spouting platitudes when the goth lolly chick has a meltdown near the end. But up to that turning point, she doesn't have nearly enough screen time, so there's basically no real progression to make it feel like she's earned that at all. And Angel, herself, really is just a very mentally ill woman addicted to the attention she gets online. She has no friends. She thinks she's a god meant to save people while she trips absolute balls, and she has an imaginary manager. But during the supposedly climactic battle against the little three-piece influencer group, Angel asserts very clearly that she believes in her twisted mind that she is the only one fit to guide humanity and give them a reason to live and be happy. So, at some point, the adoration got to her head. But instead of doing world building during the early stages of the anime to show us just how big her influence really is, and how she affects people so dramatically, she just spouts off weird black pill takes about internet culture to the void, and the show instead focuses on how she's actually a bad influence on her viewers due to her drug habits. We only see very sporadic scenes of how she had a really shitty childhood and how she's done some other majorly fucked up shit in the past, and nothing about how her mindset changed during her rise to her massive popularity. So this big arc of her trying to assert her dominance as the top dog of the internet just completely falls flat because we barely actually spent any time getting to know her and what actually happened that made her this way. Again, yet another way this feels like a fucked up documentary and not a fully fleshed out story. And then at the end, Angel basically says, "Yeah, well, I'm pretty much forever fucked up in the head, so I'm going back to being a streamer because I can't get enough of people online parasocially fawning over me. But, normal people should be normal." What? Despite not being the top dog anymore, she wants to go back to streaming because she's fucking addicted to that shit. So maybe it's trying to say happiness looks different for everyone? And maybe this is a Yukiko Arise situation where the destination might be the same as the starting point, but the difference is in how they feel about it, but that really feels like a stretch. Again, trying to validate this fucking character arc, I just confuse myself. But then at the very end, all of a sudden, the show does a 180 saying, hey, this streamer-fan relationship can actually be a positive one with the right mindset on both sides. And then true happiness lies within you, yourself, and not in what other people are doing on social media. And then there might be no God, but we're all still here and alive, so let's be in this together. And by the way, the show has a weird fixation on atheism for some reason, which again has no real place in this at all. And that kind of positive messaging is all well and good, but there was not even the slightest hint of this turning to that positive messaging at any point previously. It was all black pill shit up until then. So again, it just feels like we're being told what the show writers think about the internet and its effect on society and not experiencing an actually worthwhile story. And maybe that's the point. And if it is, I don't like it. Also, the 3D in this doesn't look great. It's not atrocious by any means, but it's not seamless at all either. So yeah, the only people I recommend this to are the slim margin of crazy people who are in the Venn diagram of liking both true crime documentaries and VTubers/idols. And maybe this weird, fucked up documentary style is what you want out of an anime experience because it's unique. And if so, maybe you will enjoy this because it's not like it isn't competent. The 2D visuals are excellent. It tries out all sorts of weird art styles and sometimes real life shots too. The music throughout is great as well, but also nothing in this show is lessons you're going to take with you beyond watching this. Like the people who actually need to be told that being parasocial is bad are not going to be watching this. So while it is competent, it's also not worth any amount of real investment because whatever story it's trying to tell is just a fucking mess. this whole thing is just an unusual, bizarre, trippy experience. Like, you'd be hard-pressed to find redeeming qualities in this other than what I just mentioned. Next up is Scum of the Brave. This is a 2-core, 24 episodes, the only one this roundup. Here's the thing, right? For new anime especially that I'm seeing for the first time, I try to go in with no expectations whatsoever and judge each show on its own merits or shortcomings. That said, the only way I ever end up actually disappointed is when I thought a show had promise at the start, only for it to flounder or just flop spectacularly. See where I'm going with this? Before I give you any examples, I'll set the scene here. The Braves are basically bounty hunters who use E3, which is a drug that's the source of the supernatural abilities that people in this world can use, to hunt down dark lords or crime ringleaders who use E3 to commit crimes and the like. But it's come to a point now where Braves are basically just murdering those criminals since there's not really any other way to fully put a stop to those crime rings. So it leaves Braves as a whole in a morally gray area, right? Because a lot of them end up feeling just like murderers, even if the people they're killing are irredeemable criminals. And there are some fucked up people who become Braves specifically because it's basically legally excused murder. Again, that concept is interesting by itself. But now for my example. The 3 girls, high school girls, who act as the main character's students, attend an academy that trains new Braves. But instead of taking the first half or so of this show to explore the world as a whole, the implications of that Brave school even existing, the people behind it, or even anything more about E4, which is like this super dangerous, stronger version of E3, or anything similar throughout the world, this show just jumps right into the conflict. We learn a little about the first squad of villains that our main character faces in that conflict before it starts really escalating. But then, in the first real meaningful fight they have, the green-haired guy actually just kills off 2 of his allies, who are also his siblings, by the way, just because he didn't want them to get captured alive and delivered back to their father. And so there's not really intrigue there as much as it feels like there's just wasted potential. And on top of that, the inciting incident for that fight, and even Yashiro, the main character's motivations throughout the second half of the show, was the guy with the glasses getting murdered on the job. But even by the end, when we learn why the bad guys killed the guy in glasses, it ends up calling into question what Yashiro even wanted to accomplish by following that trail and trying to get revenge for the glasses guy. And even as more fights continue to unfold, the show executes them like they're supposed to be meaningful or pivotal fights, but I have no idea who the bad guys actually are or why I should even care. And the fights don't end up being meaningful or pivotal. And while I do think the 3 schoolgirls are decent enough as characters and enjoyable to watch, they don't really have enough depth as characters to justify them being the main cast and helping carry the show. But the even bigger issue is Yashiro, the main character. He's an utterly bland take on an unwilling mentor figure for these 3 girls. He saves Aki on a whim, and now they all look to him for support, but he wants nothing to do with them and treats them like trash until about halfway through. But it also never explores the actual reasons why he doesn't want to have pupils or be responsible for anyone else until that halfway point or so. And there are implications before that, sure, but not actually diving in early on is a misstep in my opinion, because you never truly feel like you want to root for Yashiro even a little bit until halfway through. I'm not going to drag this out by giving even more examples, but the plot turns out to be centered around various figures involved in illegal E4 dealings, which the show, before everything really got going, made out to be just some random thing that didn't really matter to the story, but turns out it does. And it's not like the ideas in the plot are bad, but the execution of it all is absolutely nonsensical and completely lacks weight. It somehow delivers the plot in a way that makes you care about none of it. The 3 schoolgirls grow more as fighters than they do as characters, and you have to really squint to see Yashiro's arc for what it actually is. That being him recognizing that he does want to believe in the good in people, even if it's difficult for him to actually bring himself to, and that Braves should fight to give people hope, even if that's not how most Braves actually are. But it's hard to even recognize that arc because his morals are based on what he learned from his mentor, Aki's father. But we only see like sporadic flashbacks that feature Aki's father, and every time we do, he's saying something slightly different than what we saw him say in the previous flashback. His words in any given flashback just so happen to match whatever Yashiro is thinking at that given time. So that influence on the way Yashiro thinks now feels inconsistent at best. Even the way the show develops Yashiro's relationships with the girls as it goes on feels inconsistent, and it hardly feels like he's earned their full and complete trust in the way we see in the show, or his growing attachment to them as their guardian and mentor figure. There are hardly any actual moments in the show where Yashiro actually appreciates them. So the emotional bond doesn't actually feel like it's there at any point. And the way everything resolves really isn't bad, but again, it just lacks that sense of a satisfying conclusion. The big secret behind E4 is with Aki, which, again, investigating E4 was kind of the launch pad for the plot. And that also reveals more about her dad, who Yashiro's mentor, and how he worked with E4. But learning all that has no real tangible consequences on the story itself. So we're just like, okay, so... And the guy with the glasses dying is what really set everything into motion, since that gave Yashiro the motive to really go the distance. But what it all basically came down to was the fact that the leader of Half Dragon, revealed to be the blonde schoolgirl's father and the head of the Brave Training Academy, is the one enabling the Dark Lords to commit crimes by helping distribute E4, among other things. By doing this and enabling Dark Lords to continue committing crimes, he single-handedly gives Braves their whole reason for existing and being lauded as heroes, despite being murderers. So everything about this world is just this guy's twisted idea of maintaining balance. And since Glasses Guy refused to play along after learning the truth, Half Dragon killed him off. But even after we learned that truth, pretty much nothing has changed. Yashiro just goes back to his job as a Brave. The academy continues as it was, and presumably the distribution of the dangerous E4 drug is still ongoing with no interruptions. And no revenge was taken for the Glasses Guy either. He's just dead forever now. Unless you really want to count making the Count of Storms lady work part-time at the dive bar as revenge. So what the fuck was Yashiro even trying to do with all this crap? Nothing, apparently. So this whole story just fails to provide real meaningful payoff, or even consequences. So overall, while I do think the characters are okay for the most part, even the quirky villains, the execution of the story they got stuck in does them no favors. Like, this has a decent sense of humor, but for a 24-episode endeavor, this is tough to recommend. Alright, on to sequels. First up, Classroom of the Elite, Year 2, First Semester. No other show makes 15-year-old boys look and act like 35-year-old men, and 15-year-old girls look like 15-year-old girls with massive honkers, quite like Classroom of the Elite. Watching the anime and comparing it to the light novel of this is fascinating, because the way this is paced just wastes no time. This season in particular, because it follows strictly Ayano Koji and Suzune mostly. Like in the early going, just about every scene of deliberation or even little chats with less important characters or guys from other classes serve to justify the actions they ultimately take. And it's just like boom, 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 one after another with no room for rest. And while I would normally outright criticize that as making this harder to follow, I actually think that if you're the type who is watching season 4 of Classroom of the Elite, just piling on information repeatedly and forcing the viewer to digest it on their own so as to fit as much as they can would actually work pretty well for the audience this one is targeting. And I don't think this does it in a way that makes all the information hard to digest. And that's absolutely a credit to the show, this season in particular. I just feel the intrigue and pacing were spot on this time around. Although I think I could have gone without making such a big deal out of the weird romance angle between Ike and Shinohara, or just without that angle altogether. I think the twist with Nanase was kinda underwhelming. Her motivations were flimsy at best, and then that leading into the revelation that Ichika, who, by the way, is by far the most interesting new character introduced this season, being the White Room student was, again, kinda underwhelming. I felt like the idea that there is another student on Ayano Koji's level who's out to get him among the incoming class was a huge point of intrigue coming out of Season 3, and you could have really played up the mystery of that in this season to up the intrigue even more. But to kind of drop that ball for Ichika, who is just extremely mentally ill and just adds to the laundry list of girls in love with Ayano Koji for some reason, feels like a letdown. Like, while I do think she's interesting in the way that she affects the world and interacts with the other characters, plus like her fight scene at the end is cool and she falls into her role nicely, I still think we totally fumbled any intrigue that was there coming out of the last season. Like, we fumbled the concept of the mystery White Room person, right? Sort of on this same point, I think it's worth mentioning that in the past, I've criticized shows for having a protagonist who never struggles or even writes off their own plot as lame. And I think it is kind of hard to fully invest in the show knowing that Ayano Koji thinks of every single other character, including his girlfriend, as less than garbage. But I also recognize that is the point of this show. That's its whole angle. And I think it has successfully built a fascinating network of characters with all kinds of different goals and motivations that just keeps you wanting to know more. And even if Ayano Koji is just dicking around because of some weird grudge against his dad, the other characters are taking everything seriously. So it is at least kind of interesting to watch everything unfold, regardless of whether or not Ayano Koji is directly involved. Although a lot of what happens can sometimes get a little boring or just mundane. There actually seemed to be a little discourse about the end of this season, specifically about how Ayano Koji fought 2 grown men at once, and now has an expanding harem of women who like him for seemingly no reason. And the harem point I kind of agree with. Like, this show didn't need to have anyone date anyone. Like I've mentioned before, the gacha game thing, you can just designate characters to play certain roles in the story and then design them to be absurdly hot after that, and the appeal is still there whether or not anybody kisses anybody else. But then again, at the end of the day, I don't care much about the harem thing because it kind of makes me laugh. But the fighting thing is a moot point, in my opinion. I saw a tweet that was like, see, this is where the show lost me. Huh? You made it past season 2 and the Ryuin fight where Ayano Koji didn't even break a sweat, but this is the breaking point? Like, that doesn't make any sense. We've been new. Ayano Koji is mad capable in a fight. Who says he can't beat up 2 grown men? But yeah, regardless of if you take this one seriously or if you're like me and it makes you chuckle, this show has firmly entered Shield Hero Tensura territory where I think they're just gonna keep making it since the people who like it really, really like it. So yeah, no complaints from me. Definitely enjoyable. My dad and I are the same, but different. He would never try to help a stupid, worthless, useless, idiotic, dumbass, retard girl. Reborn as a vending machine, I now wander the dungeon, Season 3. For the third and final time, this is deceptively good. It's kind of like a D&D campaign in anime form. It's a well-constructed fantasy world featuring a wide variety of characters in different roles. And then you have that one guy who for some reason decided his character was a vending machine. But then the DM decides to play along, but accidentally ends up making the vending machine crazy overpowered. Or maybe the vending machine guy kept rolling nat 20s and it got out of control. Like, really out of control. This one, while it doesn't succeed at getting you, like, super invested in the narrative, I think it does have the big twists and turns to keep you engaged with it. And when the big final arc is going down, we saw all the demon generals or whatever, right? Who have very unique abilities and distinct character designs and traits and all that. Like, they're not memorable characters, but we did try with them, you know? Like I said, all the elements of a properly engaging story are here. It even lets a bunch of the minor characters we met throughout the seasons play their own small roles during the final arc, which makes it feel like this whole wacky journey we've been on has been worth it, right? Like, it's paying off even the small things. And the main characters have clearly grown since the beginning as well. Plus, this season resolves the big conflict from last season with the Menagerie of Fools family. Like, I don't want to get too much into the actual story here, but it really is great fun for what it is. I mean, in what other show are you going to see the big bad final boss demon lord thing get beaten with a barrage of falling pickup trucks and carbonated beverages? It is probably worth mentioning that this one's smaller scale conflict, like tension or disagreements among the main group, much of it is actually resolved in fairly quick, sometimes underwhelming fashion, and because this one is very obviously a parody of isekai fantasy shows, that works just fine for this one, but it's also part of the reason why you don't get fully invested. So that's probably the main pitfall of this one, trying to push a real story, because that lack of suspension of disbelief carries over to the real conflict as well. So while it adds to the sense of fun, because it takes everything in stride while keeping it lighthearted, you just don't really get to the point of truly caring about everything, aside from maybe a few of the main characters that we spend a lot of time with. But yeah, that's pretty much all I got, just echoing my sentiments from the first 2 times I talked about this. And the ending was perfectly fine as well. Like, if you like fantasy shows, but also don't take anime too seriously, this is a damn fun watch for what it is. And 3 seasons to wrap it all up is not too shabby at all. Next up is Mission Yozakura Family Season 2, Part 1. It's no secret that I love this show, but now that the manga has been over for a while, going back to the anime has given me a bit of new perspective on it. And not in changing my opinion of the show, because it's still great, but I just think this is exactly what I wish I grew up watching. I said this last time, but it's the perfect balance between goofiness and fun with a good, compelling narrative. Although this can be paced a little slow at times when it comes to actually important stuff in the narrative. But I'm willing to forgive it because the sense of humor is so good. I talk a lot in these reviews about wanting characters to feel like they've earned the growth that they achieve through their character arcs. A perfect way to demonstrate what I mean in Tayo's case is the licensing exam he takes where his siblings-in-law are his proctors. It might seem unnecessary at the time, but without it, there's no big statement moment where Tayo demonstrates how he's different from how he was at the start of the series in a relatively low-stakes environment. Like, that exam is the show's way of showing that Tayo has grown, right? That's the kind of thing that makes the characters feel like they've earned their growth. So the show's lead character has a journey worth investing in. And that's like 3/4 of the battle for your attention long-term. But again, I think this one's main strength is in its cast of main characters, the Yozakura siblings, and how diverse they all are, yet how well they work together. It's always fun to watch them go about their spy business because everyone, despite being gimmicky, is a well-rounded character with unique strengths and weaknesses, and the whole family has an easily digested dynamic that doesn't get stale. It's truly a thing of beauty. Even the powers they each use are interesting and well-suited to their personalities. Even the narrative itself, with the history and origins of the Yozakura family, feels pretty unique among the world of anime. All the rules about the bloomings, its consequences, Tsubomi and all that, it all aligns with the rules the show creates for itself. So it's very consistent with the rules in universe. So while this definitely has some episodes that are basically filler episodes, it also does everything a good shonen anime should, and at a strong level. And that includes visuals, by the way. Not every fight is at the same level, mind you, but it doesn't ever slack off either. So absolutely fair play to this one. So yeah, this is definitely more geared toward a younger audience, but it can absolutely still hold its own in the world of new gen shonen anime. And I really like the colorful and diverse cast of main characters, so I'm a big fan of this one. Looking forward to part 2. Next up is The Angel Next Door Spoils Me Rotten, Season 2. I believe I said this last time, but this is very cute. I think it more than delivers on what it promises itself to be, especially now that Amane and Mahiro are dating. That being said, this doesn't really do anything for me personally. Even amongst the new-ish trend of cozy romance anime, I find this one particularly uninteresting and not very engaging. Again, that's just my personal opinion as a viewer. If you like this kind of thing, this absolutely succeeds at what it's trying to be and is relentless with cute, cuddly, romantic moments. In spite of my opinion, this has a lot of good stuff about it. First and most important, the way the show depicts Amane and Mahiru's relationship is so much more maturely handled than a lot of other high school anime relationships. They set a great example. They communicate clearly and openly about their feelings, don't feel pressure from outside to rush into anything, and just genuinely love spending time together. Acts of service, words of affirmation, more physical touch than most anime could ever dream of, the whole 9 yards. The supporting characters in this don't do much. They do try with some, like there's the situation with Chitose and Itsuki, or whatever their names are. And like Itsuki's dad doesn't approve of Chitose or whatever. But nothing really comes of that, nor is it resolved in the span of this season. Most other characters have no role to play and are just here to fill space, which is fine for a slice of life rom-com, I guess, especially since this show in particular puts all its investment in the main two. But yeah, this is all just romantic moments between the main two throughout various typical slice of life scenarios, pretty much. That's about all it amounts to, especially since there's no substantial developments by the end. Again, I think the show handles everything well, but I just don't find it particularly rewarding. I get I'm not supposed to feel engaged necessarily by a show like this. I'm supposed to feel comfy and warm in my romantic little heart. And this absolutely does deliver that, for sure. I guess it's just a testament to my personal preferences in anime. So I'll just repeat my catchphrase. I'd rather be watching One Piece. The beginning after the end, Season 2. I don't know what the animators took between Season 1 and this, but it worked. Like, this has a fair bit of sequences that each on their own outdo everything in Season 1. Visual upgrades aside, this still doesn't really do anything for me. Feels like just another unremarkable old man reincarnates as a powerful boy isekai fantasy. There's no real big picture that we're building towards, so the plot happenings just feel kind of pointless and disjointed from each other. Things just happen for no real reason. Again, I've said it a gazillion times about other shows. This isn't bad at all. It's a decent fantasy show, but there's nothing here that's particularly intriguing. There's no end goal for any of the characters that drives them forward, and only small things change as it maintains a status quo. The only thing that really feels like it has ranging consequences in this season is when Arthur teams up with some of his friends and some randos to go into a new dungeon, and the little noble asshole kid retreats and betrays his friends. But even that, doesn't have any real effect on Arthur. It just kind of severs his friend group, and then he makes a fool out of the noble asshole kid in court. Ultimately, it means nothing at all. Again, the setting and characters and all that, it's not bad, but there's nothing interesting about the characters that earns any amount of actual praise. The whole show is just fine. And maybe if I was 12 years old, this would be the coolest shit ever, and I would love this show forever. But in this day and age, something unremarkable is less fun than something bad. And there are an infinite amount of other shows you can watch that are similar to this and just better. So this is tough to recommend. Not bad, just not really interesting at all. Next up is the most heretical last boss queen from Villainess to Savior Season 2. Surprising to see this one come back after so long away. I don't remember how I talked about this last time, but I think I had a pretty good opinion of it, and I still do. It's pretty good. I think Pride as the main character does the most for this show. She cares deeply about the people close to her. She takes action when it's necessary. She really brings down the hammer on these various handsome guys throughout this when they can't sort out their own feelings. And all of that while also sorting out what she knows from her previous life when she saw all of this in game form, and approaching everything as best she can without compromising her morals or affecting the timeline too much. But even other than that, I think this is just very sensibly done. The show likes to show off Pride's cute sides when it has a free moment, which makes her even more endearing as a character. Most of the conflict makes sense, and the way Pride and her posse of handsome lads are able to intervene and help resolve everything is sensible as well. No real holes in anything, and the various troubled men all have backstories that help us understand what they're going through, and that don't eat up too much time in a given episode. Both Leon and Cedric are decent characters for the limited roles that they play here. Plus, in a lot of these high society, kingdom, fantasy type shows, you hear a lot about kingdoms we've never seen or heard of before, potentially, maybe declaring war, or some guy who's not the king trying to potentially spur the people into an invasion so he can stage a coup. But nothing actually ends up happening, and we never even meet the guy who was responsible. This show is like that too, but it also doesn't overcomplicate it, so it feels pretty easy to follow what they're saying, which is nice. Although aside from Pride, pretty much every other character falls into a pretty standard trope, with their only notable trait being their unfettering love and adoration for Pride. So I think it's tough to really like any of the supporting cast, especially because a good chunk of their actions are what Pride has them do, or just them protecting her. So like a lot of shoujo isekai stuff like this, pretty much everything revolves around the main character, which is fine for something like this, but I'm not going to be praising the other characters much. Also, the various scenes of how Pride was in the original game, the timeline where a Japanese girl doesn't get reincarnated into her body, they don't actually mean much of anything. I think they're intended to endear the love interest boys to us a little more, because it's like, here's what's being prevented since Pride isn't a big bad bitch anymore. But it's also just strange to see those scenes because the actual timeline never even remotely feels in danger of falling down that path, because we already know the reincarnated Pride is a sweetheart. So like, there's no real jeopardy there. Those scenes are just weirdly there for whatever reason. But yeah, Pride is definitely the highlight here. And I can't really say how this felt as a follow-up to season 1, because this season felt like a couple of just new story arcs that didn't really build off what happened before. Again, which is fine, but yeah. This is nothing to sneeze at. Definitely in the upper half of shoujo isekais. Next up is Farming Life in Another World, Season 2. Well, if you've been watching my roundups, or have even made it this far into the video, I bet you can guess how I feel about this show. I tend to prefer shows that, have goals, which meaningful, well-written, intentionally flawed characters grow to achieve over time so that your investment feels rewarded. This is just a game of The Sims, but all of the women are somehow the prettiest woman you've ever seen in your life, and also you don't even get the satisfaction of building the city, town the way you want it. You just watch some other guy do it. It's not like this doesn't try, right? Like, it has the same recycled sense of anime humor you see in many other shows, where every character is quirky and over the top and goes overboard doing regular everyday things, but it's not trash or anything. There's clearly a lot of thought and attention to detail given to the expansion of the city this guy is building, and even if it'll never actually mean anything, there's plenty of world building throughout that gives you a sense of what the world outside the city is like. There's lots of variety in creatures and demi-human races and stuff that all help out the city in different ways. And it has some decent fights when it has like the little mini tournament stuff or whatever, so it's like the visuals can be pretty good. So the show does try. I just have no interest in anything because nothing is ever consequential, no matter what it is. Nothing they do has actual value, even if you were to try to take it into real life, because even when they do like cooking or whatever, it's all done with old-fashioned or fantastical techniques. And you know what? I decided I wasn't open-minded enough, so I read some positive mal reviews of this show. And I suppose there really are people who actually value shows like this that are slow and actively do not feature any drama whatsoever. So if that is your thing, you probably like this one. But I just fail to see the value in it because it's not really engaging, nor does it have any characters or plot points that actually mean anything. So while it is competent for what it is, I truly fail to find any reason to watch this unless you're actually trying to fall asleep while watching. But if I had to say one thing that I truly believe from the bottom of my heart is good about this show, it's that it employs a lot of voice actors. Next up is Wistoria, Wand and Sword Season 2. I actually think this is becoming a surprisingly big deal among shonen anime for younger fans, which is a good thing. And of course, I love this show as well, in a slightly different way, but I love it. To start with, let's just pile on all the praise the show deserves, right? Visually, this show is very strong. It's not up there with your JJKs or Chainsaw Mans or what have you, but absolutely nothing to sneeze at. It's more than enough to fully show off this universe's magic and the full extent of what's possible with it. Plus, Will's important fight scenes do get a lot of love. Also, we get a lot of payoff in Will's character arc in this season. Between the New Year's battle and the stuff at the Bloom, all of it's paying off what we saw Will go through in Season 1, and that we know he endured in his life before the point where the series started. So the series is rewarding you for sticking with it. Classic shonen anime stuff, right? That's why shonen anime's payoffs are always the best in anime, because the characters go through the lowest lows before hitting the highest highs, and it rewards your investment. The pacing in this is good as well. 2 seasons in and we've already made really good progress. The first initial goal of ascending to the tower is checked off. The characters are mostly plain and fall squarely into specific anime archetypes, but not bad either. Just because they are archetypical doesn't make them bad. And some stuff here is kind of convoluted, right? Because apparently Will's promise to Elfie was a curse that is part of the reason Will suffered and or why he can't use magic properly. But it's magic. We're not supposed to understand it logically, right? That's the point. Magic can do whatever you want it to do. Also, the new spell that Will created. What? But the reason I love this show so much is what I mentioned when I covered the first season. It truly is a resurgence of the types of fantasy anime I grew up on in the early to mid 2010s. Like, the ones that just shamelessly included a harem of women crushing on the main character, while also including a bunch of other shonen anime tropes. This brings back so many of the tropes I saw in those types of anime, and does them so earnestly without a hint of irony. It's beautiful. Like, Colette is the perfect example of what I mean. She is the type of love interest girl you'd always see in those shows, who just had a sweet, hopeless crush on the main character, but is obviously not the love interest that'll probably win in the end. So she's just forever doomed to always get interrupted by something or another when she tries to make her move. Even the very emotionally heavy way that Will learns how to use and expand on his abilities reeks of shonen anime, and the invention of the new spell, Courage, without even a little irony is just... wow. It's truly a magnificent thing. I mean that. Like I said, I love this show. Like, just recently, I got a comment on my Believers cover from someone who said that Wistoria is the best anime they've ever watched, probably from a child, right? So whatever the show is doing, it's working. So yeah, really strong stuff. Again, like many shonen of this new modern generation that are just getting warmed up, nothing groundbreaking story-wise, but more than enough to get and keep you invested. And finally, Rent-A-Girlfriend Season 5. Every time I watch this, I wonder what the point is. Like, yeah, it's a dumpster fire of a show, and I have to know how it ends. I said that. But also, this isn't some dynamic romance storyline with an actual meaning, because the pointless drama never ends. And it's not like we're providing some great example to horny teenagers of how to actually treat women. Because for the millionth time, it'd be one thing if Kazuya actually had character growth, but he does not. So we're not even doing a character piece like Mushoku Tensei. I truly don't understand. And a lot of this wouldn't be pointless drama if mommy was in this to serve a purpose. But once again, she is not. She's just here to be toxic. The whole angle of everyone finding out about Chizuru was just her being petty and a bitch. Because it's not like she actually wants Kazuya back. And I get that some women are just toxic. They had shitty upbringings, or any number of things could have made them that way. But again, her toxicity does not serve the actual story whatsoever. Like a real toxic girl, she just makes everything worse. And it makes sense for the story, for the truth about Chizuru being a rental girlfriend to eventually come to light. It's dramatic, it forces the characters to confront their actions and feelings and why they've tried so hard to spin this web of lies and keep up the facade they've been doing since the beginning. It's good for the story. It wasn't well executed, really, but it had to be done eventually. But it just got covered up by another lie. So the biggest point of potential drama that could ripple through the whole show and change its trajectory is resolved in no time flat and just returned everything to the status quo. So what is the point of literally anything? No, really, like the actual foundation of the show, the huge fucking lie that Kazuya and Chizuru have been playing into for 5 seasons has resulted in no meaningful drama or real development for the characters. And no, the kiss doesn't count. I don't care what your argument is about Chizuru making that choice to kiss Kazuya. The fact is, it doesn't matter enough. And that is the only real thing of note that happens in this whole season, unless you want to count Kazuya and Chizuru having a normal text conversation for the first time, an emotional high point. Which, for the series, I guess it is. There was also the family home visit. For some reason, I thought they'd already done the living together arc in the anime, but no. Oh my. But as usual, Yae Mori is really the only levity I get in this show. She's just silly and fun. And Chizuru, I don't really have a problem with Chizuru, honestly. I'd have a very positive opinion of her if this ended after season 3. But her character has been consistent throughout this. She's level-headed and stays in her lane, but I also think her approach to romance is, well, like Yamamori puts it, old-fashioned. And maybe a bit too apprehensive, but fine. Like, whatever, I'll get over it. I won't get over Kazuya, though. He still wastes half the season monologuing about nothing and thirsting over Chizuru. We all know she's hot, man. And like every time Chizuru wears a new outfit, it's like Miyajima is praising himself for how sexy she looks when Kazuya monologues about her tits and thighs. Unreal, man. By now, the show is just nonsensically pointless. It does still blaze through the chapters really fast, but there's still no light at the end of the tunnel. And it's season 5. And the worst part about all this is that season 6 will be even worse. Also, too bad about Chizuru's mom. She was hot. Anyway, that's enough for this roundup. Next one's going to be a big one. Last summer was a big one. Next summer's going to be a big one. I'm going to try to take off some of the ones I have on there so I don't hit like 45 or whatever, but there's a lot of 2-cores. A lot of 2-cores in this season. So, Tensura, Black Cat and Witch, Dames of Shadow Realm, ReZero, bunch of shit. So, we'll get there. I didn't hit my July deadline for this, but I did pretty damn good, if I do say so myself. I did pretty damn good. Especially because I had to get through fucking Needy Girl Overdose. Holy shit. I'm never doing that shit again. Fuck me.